Birthday, I promise you. Theo Usherwood's here.
Very good morning.
Very good morning to you, Theo. Thanks very much. Hope you had a nice weekend.
Yes, had a great weekend.
It was Bonfire weekend, of course, so yes. I took some flack from the fireworks brigade because I've been campaigning to try and get quiet fireworks. I actually went to a sort of a battleground in Sussex to watch the fireworks, and it's a very nice medieval sort of scene. You know, lots of people dragging you know, torches and dragging like sort of wheelbarrows full of fire, and it's really great. But then when the fireworks went off, I went, what difference would it make if these were actually silent? Because they still look amazing, but they're so loud. I
don't want to incur your wrath, Mike, but you know what? I received some words of advice from 2 Metropolitan Police officers yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
I bought some rockets from my local shop. Right. And I took them to the park. Yeah. And I thought, here we go, right, let's get some little, very small family gathering. Yeah. And
are you allowed to even do that?
Apparently not.
I was going to say. I mean, we always had them in the back garden.
They were really nice. They came out. I think they were they weren't prepared to kind of, you know, a small sort of family gathering, getting together, letting off some rockets in the park. They thought we might be youths. Yeah. And were prepared to book us, but they were extremely polite and nice, and we came to an agreement where they confiscated my rockets.
That's brilliant.
I asked to keep them, but no, they confiscated them, and I was let off with some words of advice.
Did they explain where you can fire them off? Because I mean, presumably they're on sale
in your back garden. Right. We have a sort of 9 by 4 foot
like a
yard.
Typical London garden. Yeah.
So we don't have the space to do that. But I won't be doing this again, and I didn't catch.
Well, goodness me, you could have been coming in with a criminal record. I mean, but yeah, it is mad, isn't it? Yeah. But I mean, obviously there will be fireworks going off. I mean, as I was driving back up from Sussex yesterday with my son in the car, we could see them going off everywhere. And then we go on a proper fireworks night, Bonfire night, which is also US election night, of course, which we will be here for, going all the way through the night.
And it goes on and on, doesn't it, as you say? Yeah. I mean, it starts in October, September.
And it'll be going all week, you know, and then people will still carry it on into probably the second week, and then I think, I don't know when Diwali actually ends. Diwali's on at the moment. Yes. It could be like a month long or something. And then suddenly you're into New Year fireworks, and so it'll be like sort of January the 15th before it all stops. But there we are. Let's talk about the front pages, because incredible still, really, that the budget is still on the front page, and again it shows Labour government just not quite getting it. You know, I mean, they did the budget on Wednesday. You know, we're now talking Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 5 days later, still getting criticism on the front pages right now.
And the narrative doesn't make sense, because the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, was out yesterday saying that the government couldn't afford to exempt farmers from inheritance tax, and yet we find out that actually it pays this measure of 20% tax on farms over £1 million. Yeah. It actually only equates to £500 million, which pays for a day and 5 hours of the NHS. Wow. So clearly, you know, this is something the government can afford. And the exemption...
And it's another ideological move then, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the exemption existed for a very simple reason, and that was that the government recognises, and HMRC recognises, that farmers are asset-rich and cash-poor. Right. They don't have the ability to pass on their farms, and in order to keep farms going and allow them to pass from generation to generation. And farming, you need expertise. Yes. Don't you? It's not something you could just go, oh, I'll give you a farm, and there you go, like go and you know, farm some cows and some sheep.
Well, I mean, we all know, even if we didn't know it before, if you've watched Jeremy Clarkson's show, you know, how he's had this real education, because he thought, oh, I know, buy a farm, you know, and we'll see how that goes. And it turned out he didn't know what he was doing.
It's hard work. You know, farmers suffer from high levels of depression and mental health issues because they're up at, you know,
they're working long hours.
You know, you work from 2, 3 in the morning all the way through till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So it's a tough job, and the idea is that you keep it within families, but of course this exemption will mean that the removal of the exemption and the 20% tax is going to mean that actually it's going to be very difficult for farms to continue to remain in families, because you're going to suddenly land your children with a huge tax bill, and they're going to have to sell off the land, which may actually be occupied by tenant farmers, smaller farmers that suddenly, of course, you know, find themselves out of a job, out of a career, out of a lifeline of a career, because they've suddenly had the
and there's nowhere for them to work. Interestingly, what Jeremy wrote as well in his column was that the price of arable land, if you like, and sort of rural acreage has gone through the roof, because an awful lot of sort of hedge fund managers and you know, property investors have bought land, because that for them is a great investment. So the price of land has rocketed in terms of, so I mean, some farmers may well sell the farm, but it may stop being a farm then.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you've got less product going on.
And then, of course, that affects our food security.
Yeah.
And what happens to the price of food at the shops? You know, we were told after the war, you know, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, energy security was the top priority.
Right.
We need to have a domestic energy supply.
Right.
Well, the same applies to food.
Right.
You know, we import huge amounts of...
Because there was a big wheat problem, wasn't there, for a while?
Absolutely. And if you see, you know, we saw the prices in the supermarkets go up, and actually we should be trying to invest to ensure that we can produce our food in this country, so when there is another moment of instability, whether it's war in Europe or whatever, actually we are relatively self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And this seems to be going precisely against that. It also just seems to be quite, and this is something that James Dyson picks up on the front page of the Times. He uses the word spiteful. It seems to be pernicious, attacking wealth, because there is also the removal of exemption when it comes to passing down businesses. And there's a guy called Peter White. I've never heard of Nova Laboratories, but it sounds like a very successful pharmaceuticals firm that's based in Leicester. And he makes the point that he says, my son will now need to personally generate approximately £26 million of liquid cash on my death to continue to own and manage our pharmaceutical company. This is 40 times his personal wealth, his son's personal wealth. So in actual fact, if you create a business, and one of the things is you want to create something to pass it on, it's a huge incentive,
of course,
to do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, and also it's a human sort of, I would say, inspiration, isn't it? Because you want your kids to do better than you did. If you are in a happy position where you can run a business or you can own it, you don't want to be passing debt on to your children. You want to be passing something good on, don't you? But apparently Labour government think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, well, they won't. And the point that Peter White is making is it going to be virtually impossible to pass his business on to his son and keep it within the family, and because his son was going to have to come up with, you know, £26 million of cash, which he just doesn't have. And so it will inevitably mean selling a chunk of the business in order to raise that money, and he'll have to...
Which may result in job losses and all the rest of it. You know, again, very short-sighted from Labour. Front page of the Daily Express. I watched Rachel Reeves yesterday on the rounds. I sort of saw her doing a piece with Laura Kunsberg. She's admitted, basically, that she was wrong to state during the election campaign that taxes would not have to rise. You know, very awkward moment where she was kind of asked repeatedly by Kunsberg if she had got it wrong, and she kind of took a while to get there, but she eventually said, well, I was probably wrong to say that, you know, taxes would not have to rise, and she basically admitted to being disingenuous about this whole working people stuff. Too late, yeah.
Too late. And, you know, and I think what the problem Labour has got is, you know, it came in on a platform not necessarily particularly different to the Conservative Party, but restoring trust in politics, being there in terms of, you know, improving government of public services. It was about integrity.
Yes.
And actually telling the truth is part of having integrity.
Yes.
And actually, if you tell the truth, actually, honestly, we know you need to raise taxes, and you admit, and the Labour, and, you know, Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer admitted before the election that they would need to raise taxes in order to do what they want. But they repeatedly dodged the question. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, and that is not anything, you know, towards the right-leaning.
No,
this is not biased.
If anything, they're more Labour-leaning than anything, aren't they?
They said the books were open. Everybody knew the figures.
Yeah, of course.
Journalists said, we know the figures. It's a dire state. The public finances are in a dire state. You're going to need to raise taxes. No. We can all do it through growth, we were told by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, because they didn't want to be portrayed as being the same old Labour, high tax, high spend, all of that. And that's why they ended... and now they find themselves saying that, you know, they got it... Rachel Reeves saying, well, she got it wrong on taxes. No, she didn't get it wrong. She knew the figures were there. And I think that's really... But
she's effectively admitting... She's not really admitting to getting the sums wrong. She's kind of admitting to misleading the public. That's what she's saying.
Yeah.
She's saying I was wrong to mislead you, without actually saying it in as many words.
I don't know. And once you lose that trust with voters, it's very hard to get them back.
Yeah, it is.
You very rarely hear a story. I can't even think of one off the top of my head where a leading politician has slumped at the beginning and then managed to pull it back. The only one that springs to mind is Bill Clinton in America in 1992, and a lot of American strategists are saying, well, you know, Starmer needs to repeat what Clinton did with the Democrats back in the 90s. But I can't think, other than that, I can't think of any politician, British politician, who has got off on the wrong foot with the British public with an admission like this from Rachel Reeves and then suddenly pulled it back in time for the next general election. It's almost impossible to do, and I think that's something that I'm not sure Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have accounted for. And as we've seen with Kemi Badenoch, of course, winning the Conservative leadership election at the weekend. She's got off to a flying start. I think Labour are going to have their work cut out.
Well, at the risk of paraphrasing a very famous quote from one of those presidential debates with Dan Quayle, and the guy who said this, I can't actually remember his name, but I think he must have been the Democrat vice presidential nominee, and he said, you know, I knew, effectively he was talking about JFK, you know, I knew Bill Clinton, I met Bill Clinton, Keir Starmer is no Bill Clinton, because he certainly is not. Let's have a quick look at Kemi Badenoch, because the big thing that happened on Saturday, of course, was that she finally won the long, drawn-out leadership race for the Tory party. Here she is on Laura Kunsberg, talking about being the first black leader of the party.
I think that the best thing will be when we get to a point where the colour of your skin is no more remarkable than the colour of your eyes or the colour of your hair. We live in a multiracial country, and that is great, but we have to work very hard to make sure that it doesn't become something divisive, where people see themselves as being part of groups rather than all being British. So when I hear people say, isn't this remarkable, we have a black female leader of the Conservative Party, I'm glad, because it shows that my country and my party are actually places where it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like. It's about what the offer is.
Yes, and I think she makes a very good point, and a very modern point, I think, and it was kind of interesting, wasn't it, that the leaders of the Labour Party, including Starmer and Rachel Reeves and everybody else, made a big deal of the fact that suddenly, you know, the Conservatives have got a black female leader. Well, you know, these are all very white people saying this. I mean, the only black person who's really commented on it from the Labour Party, apart from David Lammy, is Dawn Butler, who managed to retweet this tweet from Nels Abbey, in which basically she said, today the most prominent member of white supremacy's black-faced obsession, is that what it says, comes into power. It really is quite an extraordinary thing to say.
Yes.
She took it down pretty much straight away, but Keir Starmer's refusing to suspend her.
He's refusing to remove the whip from Dawn Butler, and there is precedent actually for Keir Starmer to remove the whip, because you'll remember back in 2022 Rupert Huck, another Labour MP of course, was suspended from the party after saying that Kwasi Kwarteng, who was leading Conservative at the time, Chancellor, was quote superficially back. She regained the whip, the Telegraph's reporting, and of course it's right after 6 months having apologised for commenting and undergoing anti-racism training.
Yeah. But Starmer hasn't said anything like that about Dawn Butler.
Starmer has not said anything. The only thing we have is that Labour sources are pointing to the fact that Dawn Butler removed the tweet or the retweet quickly.
Right. Presumably because she was asked to.
She was asked to. But this is a trap, Mike, that Labour MPs are going to continue to fall into. They're going to find it very difficult against Kemi Badenoch, and I think the issue Labour have with this one is it's going to cut right between who they are, who they're standing up for, and who Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and the leadership want to get them to appeal to be.
Right.
And I think that Kemi Badenoch, we know that she's a problem for Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
She said yesterday in that interview that clearly she's not more of the same, and I think that's going to be a difficult dynamic for Nigel Farage. I think at some point there's going to have to be some sort of accommodation between the two parties. But I think also, and this has been overlooked because we've just been obsessing about the Conservative leadership and framing it in terms of Reform UK, but actually I think this is much more problematic for Labour.
Yeah.
And I think away from the...
Starmer won't know how to deal with it with the dispatch box.
Prime Minister's questions is going to be...
Because he's dead scared of women.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to say that because he clearly is. He doesn't know how to deal with women. Do you remember the Labour... Rosie Duffield, I think it was, who said he's got a problem with women?
Yes.
And I think he does.
Yeah.
And he's now got a bigger problem because it's a black woman.
And he got rid of his only female chief of staff. Yeah. The lads are back in charge in Downing Street. Yeah, it's going to be very difficult at Prime Minister's questions. First one coming up this Wednesday, and to see how that goes. How does he handle it? How does he come back against what Kemi Badenoch has said? And on the economy, we go back to the budget. As Badenoch was saying yesterday, there is clear blue water between the Labour Party and the Tories now. There is so much for them to go on in terms of opposing the national insurance contributions rise for employers, opposing what's happening to farmers. Kemi Badenoch suddenly finds herself with ammunition, whereas previously when you looked at the difference, when sometimes watching Starmer versus Sunak, or even Starmer versus Boris Johnson, it felt like they were they were squabbling over sweets. There was nothing really there. There was there was no substance to the debate. Now it's going to be box office because there's so much there's so much difference.
Yeah, I think she's going to be great. I think she's going to be terrific. Very, very interesting times. Coming back, we're going to be talking about Keir Starmer today, who's up in Glasgow. He's launching a summit, believe it or not, to smash the gangs. We'll also be talking about Donald Trump and, of course, Kamala Harris, because we're only 24 hours away from America Decides, incredibly. November the 5th, tomorrow, Tuesday night, we're going to be here all night with you, bringing you all of the latest from the race for the White House. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. James for Bury St Edmunds. I hope Trump wins the election just to see Starmer's mug. Yeah, great show. Keep up, mate.
James, thank you very much indeed. Theo Usherwood's here. We've got lots more to do. This is Morning Glory. We're already still 9 minutes to go before we normally start. So the bonus is here. It's an extra It's a 4-hour show now. Don't miss it every morning since from 6 o'clock. This is Morning Glory.